Hey, so in today's video, we're going to be going over how each of the pieces move, and then two kind of special moves called en passant and castling. So we're going to start with the rook, and this is on lichess.org. And if you go under Learn and then Chess Basics, you'll get to the same site that I'm at. The reason we start with the rook is that it's very easy to move. It can go vertically or horizontally. So up, down, side to side. And we can capture any piece in our way. So if we go here, we can stop right at the star. And here we can go down, and then our next turn, we can go to the right. And that's the rook. So nothing too fancy about it. The rook is worth 5 points because they're really good at getting checkmate at the end of the game. All right, let's go to the bishop now. So the bishop, we get two bishops. We get one on our dark squares and one on our light squares. The bishops are really good at zigzagging between the pawns, so they're going to be really good in the beginning of the game. The bishops are worth 3 points because they're not as good as rooks as getting checkmate and stuff. So this bishop is on the light squares, which means I can move anywhere on the light squares. And so I'm going to go up here and grab this star, and then I'm going to go all the way here and grab this star. And you'll notice that if you have a light square bishop, you can only attack pieces that are on the light squares. And if you have a dark square bishop, you can only attack pieces that are on the dark squares. So just to illustrate that, this light square bishop would take here, on his next turn take here, then take here, and the same with the dark square bishop. All right, let's move on to the queen now. The queen can move like a bishop or a rook. The queen is worth 9 points. So we can move like a rook, or we can move like a bishop. Right now I'm on the light squares, so I'd move like a light squared bishop. Now I'm on the dark squares, so I can move like dark square bishop, which is going to be useful here. So okay, again, we can move like a rook, or we can move like a bishop, so let's move diagonally down like a bishop. Now let's go up like a rook. Now let's move like a bishop. And finally, let's move like a rook. So that's the queen. You only get one queen, unless you get your pawn to the other side. Then you can get two queens, or however many pawns you get on the side. All right. The queen is worth 9 points. The rook is worth 5 points, and the bishop is worth 3 points. So moving on, we're at the king now. And the king is worth infinite amount of points, because of course if you get checkmate, you win the game. The king only moves one square in any direction. We move diagonally, we can move up, and we can grab the star. So the king is not a great attacking piece. We mainly want to keep the king safe. We will bring it out at the end of the game sometimes to attack, so that's good. All right, the knight. So these ones are a little bit more tricky than the other ones we've done so far. The knight is also worth 3 points, just like the bishop. The knight moves in a capital L shape. So we could think of it as 1, 2, and 1 to the side. So you see how it makes this capital L. So this knight could go right here. 1, 2, 1 to the side, 1, 2, 1 to the side, 1, 2, 1 to the side. And this is kind of the shape it makes. It's like this giant wheel. And another pattern to look out for is if my knight is on the light square, I'm going to be attacking on the dark squares. So we can jump to this dark square. And now once I'm on the dark square, again, we can hop to all the light squares. So 1, 2, 1 to the side in any direction. So here we can go 1, 2, 1 to the side, 1, 2, 1 to the side, 1, 2, 1 to the side, and we'll keep hopping like this until we grab all the stars. And just like the bishop, one of the reasons the knight is very good in the beginning of the game is because it's only worth 3 points, which isn't much. And also the bishops are able to zigzag in between the pawns because they move diagonally. And the knight is able to hop over pieces. So I could go 1, 2, and 1 to the side, just like that. Now notice how I don't actually take that star when I jump over it. I'm only going to take the stars that I land on. But I can hop over all these stars, 1, 2, 1 to the side. So in a game, these stars would represent pieces. So they could be my pieces, they could be my opponent's pieces. And again, I'm only going to grab the pieces that I land on. So not the ones that I hop over, just the ones that I land on. So that's the knight. We only have one more piece to do, and that's the pawn. The pawn is worth 1 point, but it is the trickiest piece because it moves in a lot of different ways. So first, the pawn mainly moves 1 square forward. There's nothing in its way, nothing to capture. It's just going to go 1 square forward till it hits the end. And then we can get any piece we want, but you're mainly going to want to grab a queen. You can have 2 queens this way. You could have 3 queens this way. You have 8 pawns plus your extra queens, so you could get up to 9 queens if you wanted. But we're almost always going to get a queen. So again, go 1 square, and we get to the end. We can change it to a queen, we can change it to a knight, we can change it to whatever we want. Doesn't really matter. Okay, very important. When there's a piece in front of us, we can't take that piece because the pawn attacks differently than the way it moves. So although we move up, we attack like this. We attack diagonally 1 square forward. So I can go here and take. Now if you look, we go here. And now again, I can't take this pawn, but I can take these 2 pieces. I'm going to take this one. Now let's take this one. And when we get to the end, we'll get a queen. We'll start moving like a rook. So if I moved up here, I would fail because now I can't move anywhere. There's nothing to attack, and my pawn's kind of stuck. So let's try this one again. I can take here though, and again, I don't want to take this one because I'm going to get stuck. So I would move over here, and go here, here, all the way till we get to the end of the board. So that's how the pawn moves and attacks, except on the first turn. Now this is not only the first turn of the game, but the first turn for that pawn. So you're going to have a bunch of pawns on the second rank. And each one of those pawns that are on the second rank, they have a choice. They can go 1 square, or they can go 2 squares. And of course, they attack here and here. So because the star is way up here, I probably want to go 2 squares. Then I go 1 square, and then take. So whether you go up 1 square or 2 square at the beginning of the game, after that, they can still only go 1 square. So it doesn't matter if I choose go 1, or if I choose go 2. After that, it's 1 square, and we attack like this. So that's the pawn. And that's pretty much all of the pieces. There's 2 kind of tricky ones, 2 kind of special moves that we need to know. So let's do castling now. So in the beginning of the game, I moved my pawn up, my knight hopped up to one to the side, and I got my bishop out by moving diagonally. If there's nothing in between the king and the rook, the king can go 1, 2, and the rook goes right next to it. We call that a castle. The reason we call it a castle is because the pawns in front of the king and the rook are going to form a castle to protect the king. The reason we do this is that we want to get our king away from the center of the board where it can get attacked easily, and we'd like to put it at the side where it's very well defended. This is going to make it harder for our opponent to checkmate the king. So we got to get all the pieces out and then castle. If I want to castle queenside, that's fine too. Just remember, it's the king that goes 2. The king's not going 3. It's the king that always goes 2 squares, and the rook wraps around. In order to castle, you have to be on the starting squares. The king is here, the rook is here. This rook has clearly moved from its starting square. We can't castle this way, but we can castle queenside. We can't go into check or through check. So my king's not in check, but if I were to try to castle, it wouldn't let me because I'd be going through check. So we'd have to block first. Now that bishop is no longer attacking the king, and we can castle. So here to go through check, we'd actually be going into check. So we have to get rid of the knight. Now we're safe to castle. And lastly, look at all these pieces that are stopping us. If I castle now, I I would go into check from this bishop. This other bishop would be going through check, same with the knight. So I have to get rid of the knight. I still have 2 pieces. Let's block this pawn. Let's actually block maybe this way. That blocks this bishop. The knight can go here. That blocks. And now we can castle. All right, let's do en passant now. So en passant, or in passing, just means that it's a kind of a tricky move for pawns. If this pawn went 1 square, we could take it, right? So the pawn went 2 squares. We're going to pretend it only moved 1 square. So en passant is kind of like playing pretend. If they go 2, or pretend they go 1, and we can still capture that pawn. So look at this. The pawn moved 2 squares. We're going to pretend it's right here. It moved 1 square, and we're going to attack like normal. I know it's a tricky move. It does exist. It is a thing. So just something to get used to, and keep your eyes peeled for. If they go 2, we're going to pretend they went 1. And that's it. That's en passant in a nutshell. All right, so let's just go over how to set up the board. White square should be on the right. That's the first thing. If it's on the left, the board is sideways. So white square should be on the right. Next, your pawns go on the second rank. Then it's rooks in the corner, knights, and then bishops. And these get progressively taller if this was a 3D set. So rooks would be kind of short, then knight would be a little taller, bishop would be a little taller. And then when we get to queen and king, this is the tricky part. So just remember, queen on color. Black queen, black square, white square. And then the king goes on the other square. And this way, everything's lined up. And that's all you need to know to start playing this game.